Hi guys, welcome back to the Road to Success MCAT test prep series. In this video, I'll be talking about social structures that are present in sociology and psychology in our world. This will be important for the MCAT as it'll be talking about social institutions, social theories, and various different types of demographic trends, such as age, race, and immigration. I'll be wrapping this up by talking about population and globalization trends. This is a very interesting video as it's a lot more macro as opposed to everything else we've learned about psychology and sociology, which is focused on the nitty-gritty stuff. That being said, it's still very important, and even though we're at the tail end of the course, we still need to push through. So let's hop right into it. Let's talk about social institutions.
Let's start this video off by talking about social structures. Educational structures are schools and universities, and in addition to the main curriculum that they teach, they also have a hidden curriculum. Social cues, working with peers, and discipline all come from these structures. I'd like to point out that a teacher's expectations play a huge role in the ability of students to learn. If the teacher has faith in a student to learn, they will be more likely to learn, or at least try. Unfortunately, schools suffer from educational segregation because they are funded by taxes. Because of this, richer neighborhoods fund richer schools, leading to richer students receiving a better education compared to their poorer peers. This causes a cycle that unfortunately is very difficult to break. Moving on to family, I feel like this is self-explanatory. Blood relations and adoption relations can share the same strength and are usually bonded for life. Marriage, however, has ways out and can end in very bad situations such as divorce, child abuse, spouse abuse, and even elder abuse. Religion has several different subsections. Ecclesia is the dominant religion in an area. So for the US, it would be Christianity. Churches are established religious bodies. Sects are protests of main churches that break off. This would be something like the Amish culture. Cults are radical, short-term movements that reject society. This would be something like Nazism. Lastly, secularism is a push to maintain neutrality and not bring faith into the governance, while fundamentalism is the opposite, where they're pushing religion onto the governance itself and they're trying to merge it into one. Speaking of governance, there are 4 types of governments that you must know for the exam. Democracy is when the people can vote and decide on what laws pass, while dictatorships are run by one person. Communism is a classless society that is run by the government, and monarchies are governed by a king or queen. Capitalism is an economy that focuses on private companies making products and money based on supply and demand. Socialism focuses on common ownership of goods and products for the betterment of society. Lastly, let's talk about healthcare. Medicalization is a transformation of previously normal traits into medical symptoms or conditions. An example of this would be depression, which was previously considered a personality trait, and that person would just be considered a gloomy guy. The sick role is the role we play in society, where we must take a break from our responsibilities to get better. That being said, if you don't get better or don't return to work, you are seen as a deviant. The illness experience depends on the illness itself. If you have the flu or something mild, you won't change a lot and will act normal in a few days. However, terminal illnesses like cancer can completely change how you act and feel about life. Alright, social theories. There's a lot of text on the screen, so feel free to read that. I'm going to be dropping some examples here, though, of each theory while you're taking your notes. So starting with functionalism, if we look at medicine from this point of view, when people become ill, medicine ensures they return to their normal functional state. As for conflict theory, wealthier people can pay for the best medical care, while the poor can't afford the deductible or insurance that they skip. They can't afford the deductibles or insurance, so they end up skipping hospitals and are sick for much longer. As for social constructionism, we attach different meanings to different behaviors and have preconceptions of different people. These would be stereotypes. A good example of symbolic interactionism, is the doctor-patient relationship. The patient gives meaning to lab coats and stethoscopes and can affect the interaction. It's important to realize that the meaning the patient gives to these tools is because of their sign of authority. Medicine is still a male-dominated field, unfortunately, and disparity in jobs and salary exists between men and women. This translates into a modern feminist issue. Lastly, rational choice and exchange theories ask the question of what's the purpose of the medical system as a whole. Is it genuinely to help people get better, or is it a capitalist competition to earn money? Now, let's talk about demographics, starting with age. Life comes with a lot of growing pains. The dependency ratio is the number of people under the age of 14 and over the age of 65 who aren't working over the working populace. Let me draw that really quick, or write it down really quick. So, what did I say? They're less than 14 plus the ones that are greater than 65 over the working population. Now, I want to point out that the larger this ratio is, the harder it is to support the non-working population. The life course theory states that aging is a biopsychosocial process that covers or opens up a lot of new concepts for us to dig into. Age stratification theory claims that age regulates behavior, and activity theory reinforces this by stating that certain activities are lost over time but are replaced by new ones. Disengagement theory states that older adults separate from main society because they find it harder to adjust. This is true as you may notice that over the years, your friend circle becomes smaller and smaller. Lastly, continuity theory states that people try and maintain basic structure throughout their entire life. Race and ethnicity are similar yet also very different. I do want to point out that they are both social constructs. They're both social constructs, and deep down, we're all very much the same biologically. That being said, race does concern superfluous physical traits. Skin color is usually the defining one, but other cultures define it differently, for the example here, South America. Ethnicity is cultural identity, usually tied to language and or nationality. Racial differences in ethnicities can cause historically drastic events, such as genocide and segregation. In recent times, though, the world has moved towards pluralism, which encourages racial and ethnic variation. Immigration is a recent demographic transition that is being talked about a lot. An increased demand for social service and labor in other countries brings a lot of people to immigrate there, causing a brain drain in the home country. Unfortunately, it's not always smooth sailing for these workers. Dislike of immigrants can cause friction at the workplace, and international corporations will take advantage of cheap labor. That being said, immigration does solve labor shortages, and they usually bring up the GDP of a country, making it a net positive. Sex and gender are also hot topics today. Biological sex is determined by chromosomes and is different from gender, which is a social construct. Cisgender is identifying with your birth sex, while transgender is identifying with the opposite. Sexual orientation is what we feel attraction to. The norm in modern society is straight, but all orientations are valid and are considered to be normal, unlike in the past where they are marked as diseases or even illnesses or even diseases by medical organizations. An ongoing debate is whether or not there is a gay gene, and honestly, the answer to that is probably not. So, yeah, probably not. There isn't sound evidence to support the idea of a gay gene, but that won't stop people from exploring this topic. That being said, cognition dictates gender identity, and gender scripts are how our brain tells us to act regarding our gender. Population dynamics follow an interesting trend that changes as a society develops and advances. Stage 1 has high birth rates and high death rates, evening out any possible growth. Stage 2 follows increasing technology, allowing for less deaths to occur and population to grow. Stage 3 follows increasing technology as well as increasing education, so birth rates fall as well, along with the death rate. Now, the population starts to taper off and eventually stabilize in stage 4, where low birth rates and low death rates define the stage. Lastly, stage 5 is a stage where we see very, very low birth rates, rates so low that growth ceases and population begins to fall. We're seeing stage 5 a lot in East Asian countries. So think like China, Korea, Japan, places like those. And we see stage 1 and eventually stage 2 developing countries, so like African countries or Latin American countries. That being said, please study this model right here. It covers basically every single transition from stage 1 to stage 2, all the way to stage 5. And I circled these just because they're the most, but they have the most examples. Like stage 3 and stage 4, they're most developed countries. Finally, we have globalization theories. The world systems theory breaks countries off into core countries, which would be like the developed US and Europe, peripheral countries, which are developing countries like Latin America and Africa, and semi-periphery countries, which are on the verge of becoming core. These would be India and Brazil. Modernization theory supports this claim and states that all countries can follow a path to modernization. Meanwhile, dependency theory states that the periphery countries don't have the resources to develop. The hyper-globalist perspective claims that countries have become dependent on each other for growth. Note that they don't say if it's good or bad. It's an overall neutral statement. The skeptical perspective doesn't believe in the hyper-globalist approach, and instead claims that countries are regionalized and not globalized. Lastly, the transformationalist perspective claims that national governments are changing and creating a new world order. Alright, that's all I have for you guys today. We covered globalization theories as well as various different demographics. We covered social theories and institutions. And overall, this is a lot more dense than the other sociology videos I have. But I do think all of these are very important, especially, I believe, the population dynamics. So if there's any style I want you guys to study, it will be this one. That being said, that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys were able to learn something. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and happy studying.